Hello, everybody, and welcome to the People for Bikes virtual education series. Today's virtual education series is brought to you by the Sustainability Working Group at People for Bikes. Today's webinar will discuss emissions reduction opportunities in operations and in supply chains. My name is Noah Materko. I'm the Senior Manager of State and Local Policy here at People for Bikes. I'll be facilitating, so let's jump on into it. Here is a quick look at our agenda for the day. We have about 60 minutes. And as you can see, it's a pretty packed agenda. So what we're going to do is encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we will address those at the end of the webinar, just so we have time to flow through. You can see the great list of speakers we have here today, and I am going to let them introduce themselves as they speak. So I will just do a quick overview of People for Bikes, our sustainability working group, and then I'll do a short legislative recap just to let you know what's happened at state legislative sessions regarding sustainability so far this year. So I think you're all familiar with People for Bikes, but I wanted to reiterate what we do and what our goal is. Our big audacious goal is to make the USA the best place in the world to ride a bike. And as the US's sole bike industry trade association, you all help play a big role in that. And our sustainability working group also plays a big role in that. So we'll illustrate how this work is all connected. So the sustainability working group, this is a working group within People for Bikes made up of brand members. And our goal, what we do is we advance tactical initiatives to achieve environmental, health, and corporate sustainability goals for the bike industry and its partners. We support People for Bikes members companies, individual and collaborative efforts to operate more sustainably by providing education, guidance, and opportunities to collaborate on shared issues. And our work is guided by 4 key areas, and I would call these buckets. And we have multiple things that evolve that fit in those buckets, but our 4 key areas are climate action, circular economy, sustainability compliance, and responsible supply chains. And what we have here, this slide lays out the purpose and the values of the Sustainability Working Group for our members. So the goal is to table set for what the Sustainability Working Group is, what our areas of focus are, and the value that we provide to you. So our goal is to provide education, resources, and mentorship to brands along the sustainability journey. You can see our 4 areas of focus, what we provide to you, which is community, guidance, and collaboration, and what you can expect from that. And you can expect things like this quarterly education series as a part of our sustainability working group. So that's educational content directly from other brands and industry partners, interactive sessions like this where you can ask questions and learn, and opportunities to participate in collaborative initiatives. So right now we have about 80 members across 45 brands, and it's always our goal to deepen engagement with the existing members that we have to help everybody connect with each other and grow our sustainability work at each brand, and also to grow this group as well and to get more people involved if possible. So sustainability in the legislative sessions, I mentioned that my primary role at People for Bikes is helping direct state and local policy across the country with our government affairs team. This means we engage in hundreds of bills across the country. And a growing priority of our policy work is in sustainability. And we know that bikes themselves are a sustainable form of transportation, especially compared to internal combustion vehicles and other things. And sustainability through infrastructure and direct climate funding is also a priority. And we do that work through 2 areas of focus, which is our Vote for Bikes, which helps support ballot initiatives for bike infrastructure across the country, and our Great Bike Infrastructure Project, which supports local and state legislation to fund bike infrastructure, climate, and safety initiatives. But we also know that the bike industry itself can become more sustainable, and that's what we're doing here today. So we track sustainability legislation as it relates to those issue areas that we mentioned at the beginning. Sometimes we do engage directly on these bills. Other times we just connect relevant stakeholders and take positions and help them take positions. So this year we tracked close to 30 sustainability bills, and that was about out of about 800 bills overall. Um, and one trend that we follow, there's a lot of bills around battery recycling, specifically lithium-ion battery recycling. And People for Bikes and our partners have helped develop a program called Call to Recycle, which is a battery recycling program. And the goal there is to ensure that lithium-ion batteries are able to be recycled and disposed of properly. A secondary goal of that is to show compliance with potential state laws so that our members don't have to pay into redundant programs or pay the cost for waste outside of lithium-ion batteries. Out of those 14 bills, nothing super troubling came up. I think one passed in Colorado, um, but the rest were either modified or didn't go anywhere. But this is something we want to continue to monitor. Extended producer responsibility. We had a couple of those bills. By and large, of these 30 bills, only a couple of bills passed. So these are just things that we're more monitoring than anything. The EPR, of course, creates challenges and opportunities for People for Bike members. So we like to look at the specific instances in the states of what's going on there. The PFAS state laws are increasingly restricting or banning PFAS in consumer products, especially in apparel and outdoor gear. A lot of other states simply require disclosure. So this is an area where the bike industry has been really proactive in eliminating non-necessary PFAS in products. And I mentioned sustainable packaging because that's a priority issue for the People for Bike Sustainability Working Group. And we developed some resources for members, including Sustainable Packaging Guide for the Bike Industry and Chemicals Management 101, both of which I can share for those who are interested. And you can reach out directly to me, but as legislative sessions wrap up, I will have a complete package of what's gone down. And we did a webinar about that last week, which I can also share. But now I am going to transition over to Greg and let him take control and introduce himself.
Great. Thanks, Noah. Great to be here with People for Bikes. Thanks so much for having me. As Noah present on the first slide, I'm Greg Andeck. I'm Director of Partnerships at Change Climate Project, or Change Climate for short. And I've spent about 20 years working on climate from different perspectives. From early on in my career, I worked at a large environmental NGO advising companies on large sustainability programs, and then did a mix of federal and state climate policy work. And about 3 years ago, I joined Change Climate because I was really dismayed by a lot of the slowdown that we were starting to see at the policymaking level around climate, and feeling like it wasn't moving quickly enough. And certainly that's been even more reinforced today. Um, and learning about Change Climate and the focus that they had on really leveraging consumers to affect and advocate for more change within companies seemed like a really compelling lever that hadn't really been pulled. And so a big part of what Change Climate does is offer a certification program for leading companies that really want to break through some of the greenwashing noise that's out there and connect to values-based consumers on climate. And so our program is really entirely structured around that. Um, Stepping back a little bit, the organization was founded in 2019 by Peter Daring, who is the CEO of Peak Design, and Austin Whitman, our CEO at Change Climate. And they actually kind of approach the challenge from two different perspectives. Austin would go to the store and he'd see an organic label for produce and other food products, but there was no way as a climate engaged consumer that he could figure out which companies were doing a good job on climate. And so he said, why isn't there a climate label? And then from Peter's perspective, he was part of a brand that wanted to do all the right things on climate, but it was incredibly hard to know even what to do and what is the right step to take, and how do I actually put dollars to work towards things that are going to be meaningful. And so the organization really evolved out of trying to solve both of those two respective programs. As I mentioned, we are an NGO. That means that we really aim for high impact, high integrity actions. And it also means that our certification standard is advised by a set of leading experts in the climate space every year, influential NGOs like Environmental Defense Fund and B Lab and the Nature Conservancy to make sure that whatever we put out into the marketplace is rigorous and impactful. And this is kind of one of our sweet spots for certification with durable goods. We have a heavy concentration with outdoor brands, but also health and beauty, and then food and beverage brands. Any company that really interfaces their product with consumers is really our sweet spot. There we go. And over that 5 or 6 years of growth, we now have about 300 brands that we've certified to the climate label certification, and it includes a pretty range of sizes and shapes of companies from retailers like REI that Brent will be sharing more about their work later on, to smaller mom and pop size companies. The thing that really unites everyone is a desire to have an even bigger impact on climate and to really connect with their consumer base in an authentic way. There's a little bit of a lag, so apologies on the slide change here. There we go. Really, if we break down our programming, it falls into two different categories. One is the course certification, which is called the climate label. This is an evolution from a former certification we offered called climate neutral certified that some of you may be more familiar with. That evolution really happened over this past year as we found out from consumers really what they wanted to see a label in the marketplace represent, and also evolutions that we were hearing from companies on what they were actually doing around climate. And so there's been a real shift that we've seen to go beyond neutrality. So consumers largely don't want companies just to write a check and buy a bunch of offsets and say, hey, we're all done. They want companies and brands to be making investments within their own operations to make their buildings more efficient, to make their transportation and logistics more efficient, to be bringing in more sustainable materials into their products. And so the climate label is really refocused around this idea of tracking overall investments that companies are making on climate in a range of different ways. So certainly we still support high integrity carbon offsets as an important part of the solution, but we want to make sure that companies are doing a broader set of activities as well. And that's really what the climate label represents. And then secondly is our business emissions evaluator, or affectionately we call the B, and that is essentially a carbon management tool. So we want any company, whether they're experienced or just starting out, to be able to quickly measure their emissions, not have to spend massive amounts of money on costly emissions measurement software that's out there in the marketplace, but to really have what we call the public option for carbon management so that they can get started today. And then over time, this tool becomes increasingly valuable because it allows folks to set targets if they want to. It helps them spot hot spots within their emissions profile and really drill down into reduction actions targeted to those hot spots. It allows them to track over time where they're allocating dollars to climate in all those different ways I mentioned earlier. So the B has become this really important underlying bedrock tool that the certification sits on top of, and allows us as a fairly small NGO to impact a lot more companies cost effectively. And Noah, the slides are pretty slow, so I might actually ask you to advance them if possible. Thanks. And so for many of you, you're asking why get certified with the climate label? Well, for many of your customers, there's a growing expectation that you should really be leading on climate. There's always more that we can do. And so consumers want to see that companies are being part of the solution, particularly at a time when policymakers, particularly in the US, have pulled back on climate leadership. There's kind of growing expectation for companies to step up. Um, and so, why the climate label in particular? I mentioned that as an NGO-led certification, we really focus on impact and integrity. There are some other climate certifications and labels in the marketplace that don't have that same focus and priority. And so we feel like our approach is going to be more durable and tested in the long run. The other key focus of the climate label, as I mentioned, is like this very tight integration between our certification program and the underlying tools. So those two things working together make it possible for a company to, in a really efficient and affordable way, move through our certification process. I think it's hard to find that level of accessibility with some of the other programs that are out there in the marketplace right now. So looking at just some of the benefits of the climate label certification, what we found based off of the hundreds of companies that have now gone through our program is that it creates market advantage for your company. It's another thing to really be able to talk about to your consumer base about the importance, priority that you're placing on climate. It's a very tangible way to fund your climate targets. So for many of the companies that we work with, it's a sustainability team of one, or in many cases, it's a marketing person that, oh, by the way, also is tasked with the sustainability and climate efforts. So you really need a robust program to be able to take to your leadership and say, hey, we want to make a difference on climate. That means actually we have to have some dedicated dollars to fund our climate goals as an organization. And so this helps put some structure around that conversation and what you should be funding. Similarly, it really improves greenhouse gas planning. What we found is that when companies begin to track all the potential ways that they may already be spending to reduce their emissions, they're quite surprised. And they hadn't really realized that they were doing all these things because it was in different program areas under different staff people's control. And so by bringing it all in one under one umbrella, it allows the leadership team to say, wow, actually, we are doing quite a bit already. How can we build upon that? It strengthens your climate claims. So rather than you as an individual brand having to come up with your own climate claims that may be questioned in the marketplace or have missteps about how you're describing your actions. This is a way you have an independent third party that really is standing behind your efforts and putting our mark of leadership on your products as a result. And then lastly, it will help meet buyer expectation. We are seeing a lot of retailers increasingly add the climate label to their product or sustainability guidelines or scorecards. And so you will increasingly see the climate label show up from leading retailers that want to partner with their supplier brands and see that those supplier brands are making progress on climate. So positioning yourself to be prepared for those conversations and already be in a leadership lens with retailers will be supported by the climate label. So it is hard to do any of this if the consumers don't actually reward your brand in the marketplace when you do this work. And oftentimes we're asked, all right, so like we earn this certification and we put this label on our product, but then like, so what, will the consumer care? And I think a lot of the data recently suggests that consumers do care. Um, and so there's a range of different sources that are linked to in this slide but we've seen studies showing that 77% believe that sustainability of brands really matters. 65% of consumers across a range of countries expect CEOs to do even more on climate. Somewhere between 16 to 30% price premium is now paid for sustainably marketed products. That's a pretty broad set of categories there, but one data point on this topic. We do see that products that are marketed as sustainable products grow at a quicker rate than non-sustainable products. And then we've been told from our partners at Commons that they actually have seen a material sales uplift for brands that are using the Change Climate Project certification label. So it's always hard to do like a direct A/B test on some of these things, but I think the long-term trends are very positive for brands and the consumer value of certification. So what does it actually look like to get certified? So the first step for all brands is actually measuring their emissions. So the climate label certification requires companies to measure their scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions from cradle to gate. So it doesn't cover product use or disposal. The idea there is that a consumer shows up to purchase a product in the store or online. They want to know that that company has taken responsibility for all the emissions up to that point of sale. And so that really is what the certification focuses on. Once companies have measured those emissions, in many cases using our B carbon management tool, they will then need to commit to funding a climate transition budget every year. And essentially, that climate transition budget becomes the bucket by which they allocate dollars to different climate investments across their company and beyond their company in the case of high integrity carbon credits. And the way that we determine what that budget should be is essentially we each year develop an internal carbon fee that we set for all certified companies. So in 2025, the internal carbon fee is $15 a ton. So a company would measure their scope 1 through 3 emissions, multiply that by $15 a ton. That becomes the amount that they would need to invest each year in different climate solutions in order to achieve the certification. We certify based off of the prior year's investments. So they would measure their emissions, they would budget those dollars, they would spend those dollars, and then we would review the spending and all the other documentation, and then they would achieve the certification. The other last component of this is because we are a nonprofit that really prioritizes transparency and high integrity outcomes in the marketplace. We do require companies to share the details of their impact. And so, as a consumer, if you see the label in the store, you can then go on our website and you can look at what that brand has done to achieve the certification. What are their emissions? What are the specific investments that they've made over time? How are they tracking on their emissions? Is it going down? Is it staying flat? Maybe they grew as a company, but their emissions intensity went down, so that's still a positive metric. So it really is intended to bring some detail beyond the claims and support the claims that companies will be making as part of the certification. Um, so just to wrap up a few last slides here, I mentioned the internal carbon fee. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but that is one of the, I would say, unique aspects of our certification. I mentioned it's set at $15 a ton in 2025. Really, there's lots of different companies and approaches around internal carbon fees and different levels that you could set that amount. But what we found is that for most companies, that's a meaningful level of investment when applied across your scope 1 through 3 emissions. And that if those dollars are all allocated towards climate action, then it will make a meaningful difference and help keep companies on the right trajectory towards some of the science-aligned targets that we believe are necessary to avert some of the worst effects of climate change. So a lot more to talk about on internal carbon fees if you want to nerd out another time, but that's about all I'll say on that today. Um, Hopefully I'm not stealing any of Brent's thunder here, but this is a good example back to our focus on transparency. So if you go to our website and you can look at any of our certified brands and really better understand what they're doing to make a meaningful impact on climate and what they've done to achieve the certification. So for REI's example, you can see the total amount that they funded last year, the ways that that's broken out between internal investments within their company and within their supply chain, and then things they're doing outside of their supply chain through carbon credit projects, and other meaningful investments. And then you can also look ahead to what are the types of things that they want to be planning for to reduce into the future over the next 18 months. So our certification is both backwards looking and then really trying to help companies plan ahead as well. So we hope that many of you will consider joining us. If you decide to pursue certification, you get access to the Business Emissions Evaluator, which I mentioned is kind of our core technology platform, a ton of marketing resources so that you can get the greatest value out of the certification label with your consumer base when you achieve it. We have a really broad set of impactful educational programs and resources. So if you're just starting out, you can get up to speed on climate in a highly efficient way. And then, as I mentioned, like specific reduction tools that you're going to need to actually figure out, all right, what are the types of investments that I want to make and that are feasible for our company? Um, and so that's all of the certification. In many cases, folks just want to kind of kick the tires a little bit and get some experience with just the business emissions evaluator tool, and then later on decide if they want to seek certification. And so if that's sounds like your company, we have a free version of the B where you can do some very quick, rough and dirty estimates of your emissions profile based off of some spending patterns that you as a company have and some geographic and industry information you share with us. That emissions data is all going to be very average based off of what we know about companies that are very similar to yours. It doesn't include the ability to go in and really input very detailed information about, for example, your utility spending and characteristics of your product purchasing and things of that. But that's a good place to start. If you want use of the more robust tool, it's still highly affordable at $2,900 a year, versus many thousands of dollars for similar tech suite platforms out there. And we hope that as many companies as possible take advantage of that. And these are the types of outputs from that software. So it's highly visual and highly intuitive. So you can really begin to break down where are the emissions coming from within your company, um, and begin to understand what are the different hotspots so that then you as a company can say, all right, per dollar spent, like my money is going to go the furthest if I really reduce on this efficiency project to replace an old boiler in this building. Or in fact, like if I swap out this material in my product, that's the place that is going to have the biggest bang for the buck. And so the B is going to provide those type of insights to prevent your organization from spinning its wheels and doing a whole lot on things that may have limited value, or maybe not as cost effective as other types of approaches. Here's an example of just some of the other outputs, and visualization. So these are often important to like share internally within a company with folks in different parts of the brand, and bring broader teams together to say, all right, like here's a holistic look at our emissions. I recognize that I don't have full ownership over all these different sources of emissions. What are ways that we can work together and, um, really identify solutions that make the most sense at the enterprise level? So that these kind of outputs are helpful for some of those broader team discussions as well. I think that is, the bulk of my time for today, but thank you again so much. We are a resource. We want to be here to help. Changeclimate.org is the best place to initially get connected with us. You can input your information and we'll have someone get back to you fairly quickly. And then I also have my personal email here as well, if that's helpful. So thanks so much. And back to you, Noah.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Greg. And from Greg, we are going to pass it to Brent. So I will let you take it away, Brent.
Thanks so much, Noah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this morning or evening. My name is Brent, and I work at REI. We're a specialty outdoor retailer headquartered in Seattle, Washington. Super happy to be joining and sharing a little bit more about our experience with Climate Label and a little bit into our low carbon material strategy. As far as my role, I'm a product sustainability manager, really focused on guiding how we think about scaling sustainability best practices across our own brand, as well as through the many other brand partners that we retail across our stores here in the US. So in terms of our climate label certification, we were excited to achieve that certification earlier this year. And we've really saw climate label as a powerful platform for taking accountability for our emissions, really thinking about how do we reduce them and investing in those climate solutions. And as Greg just mentioned, really strengthening how we communicate our climate efforts to our consumers and members, because as we've learned, that's an important value for our members as they shop through REI. Because of all that, this is also something that we really encourage all of our other brand partners to pursue. And we've seen an increasing number of brands pursue and achieve climate label certification, which has been really exciting to see. One key takeaway from the certification process that I wanted to highlight today is that it was a really helpful exercise in zooming out and looking at all of our climate efforts holistically, from low carbon materials to logistics, procurement of renewable energy, and enabling us to identify, what were the most effective and efficient reduction levers by looking at both the associated cost and the emissions reduction potential, or as Greg mentioned, the biggest bang for buck opportunities. And something that we noticed is that low carbon materials, which I'll be talking about in a bit, can be quite costly amongst the many other reduction levers that we're pursuing. So while low carbon materials will continue to be a priority and focus for us, from that experience, we're looking at how can we lean into other reduction levers as well. And the climate label certification process, as you've seen some of those screenshots, really enables us to look at that side by side visually to see what is everything that we're doing and where do we have the biggest opportunities and how can we be most efficient in scaling those reduction levers. And last thing I'll add here is, in terms of the B tool, this is also something that we've found really helpful, and also something that we've really encouraged many of our brand partners of varying sizes and phases of their sustainability journey to utilize. So if you're just getting started, as Greg mentioned, the B tool just enables you to really get a high level basic understanding, while also there being a lot of strength and capability for that tool to enable you to dig a lot deeper to get a clear understanding of what are those hotspots and where do you want to focus on. So yeah, that was our experience with the climate label. It was a really smooth and very kind of enlightening process to go through. I also wanted to touch on materials because I know that's been a topic of interest amongst this group here. In terms of REI reducing emissions, we want to focus on where we have the most control. And one of those areas is our own REI co-op brand products. And using low carbon materials, as I mentioned, is a really crucial means for reducing emissions. So our strategy is really focused on, how do we prioritize our highest impact areas? So from a material standpoint, for us, that's nylon, polyester, and aluminum. Those are going to be our three highest emitting materials and one of our highest volume materials. So since 2020, we've significantly scaled use of mechanically recycled polyester nylons. That's like from polyester, it's going to be bottles, nylons, some most likely recycled fishing nets, and many other feedstocks. In 2024, we were just over 51% recycled poly and around 45% for recycled nylon. In terms of aluminum, that's the other area, much of which comes from our bike, so pertinent to this conversation. We're currently using just virgin aluminum right now, except while also acknowledging that's a big hotspot for us. So our team is currently exploring opportunities to scale low carbon aluminum. So right now, a couple examples are, sourcing aluminum manufactured through renewable energy like hydro, as well as sourcing recycled aluminum. So that's a journey that we're currently going through right now. And one thing I just want to end with is there is a ton of exciting innovation happening in low carbon materials, particularly around textile to textile recycling. There's a lot of really cool innovation. As we know, these are materials that are really hard to recycle through conventional means. So there's a lot of innovation happening at the polymer or a monomer level to recycle those materials. So our team is working really in close partnership with our materials team to, evaluate these technologies, its circularity, and its emissions reduction potential. So we see a lot of potential in this space to scale beyond just mechanically recycled, because we'll need to do that to really see the emission reductions that we'll need to achieve to get to our enterprise reduction goal. So that's it from me. I think we may have some space for questions at the end of this webinar, but again, Noah, thanks for the time and space for us to share the work that we're doing. And I'll hand that back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brent. That was fantastic. We are going to keep the conversation moving with Paul. So I will let Paul come off mute and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Noah. Hi, I'm Paul Ziegel, Product Sustainability Manager at QBP. And we're both a distribution company, but we also have our own brands, bike brands, parts and accessory brands. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about supplier engagement. So like most brands, our Scope 3 emissions from our purchased goods, bikes, frames, parts, and accessories is a significant portion of our greenhouse gas emissions. So partnering with our suppliers is really important for us to meet our reduction goals. So we took a couple of years ago when I started in this role, we took a phased approach with working with our suppliers. So the first phase of that was really to introduce our sustainability vision with our suppliers, talk about why sustainability is important to QEP and how it's aligned with our company values. And this was a good process for us. It was not only that introduction, but then it also opened the conversation of asking what our suppliers were doing, if they had sustainability work in place. And so it really opened up that conversation, and we were able to get information on which suppliers actually had sustainability goals. So then the next phase, the following year, I created a sustainability survey that we sent out to those same key suppliers. And this had a list of questions from Have they measured their greenhouse gas emissions? Have they set reduction goals? Have they made progress on those goals? Do they have material specific greenhouse gas measurements on their materials? And then also what capabilities they might have related to low impact materials, recycled materials. And that again gave us a little more depth of visibility of which suppliers were actively working in sustainability, identified some opportunities for some of our development projects around more sustainable materials in the future. And then just this last fall, QVP and some other brands working with Shift Cycling Culture created a climate action training that was specifically designed for the bike industry and targeted for suppliers, manufacturers. So we actually had one of our suppliers help with the pilot of that training. So they participated in the pilot and gave feedback. We also had a couple of our staff in our office in Taiwan go through the pilot training. And so we were actively engaged there. And then once it launched in November, we invited those same key suppliers to participate in the training. And we had really good engagement of all the, we had over 90% of our suppliers either complete the training and get certified, or were, last time I checked, were currently taking the training. That training's free to anyone who wants to take it. You don't have to be a manufacturer. You can just have interest in sustainability. It's a multiple online six different modules, so you can do it at your own pace. It's also available in Mandarin and Vietnamese, so great for suppliers to learn in their own language. And then the last phase that we're going to work on coming up this fall is really that follow-up to that climate action training. What plans or actions or outcomes did our suppliers learn, and have they adjusted their plans? And so that'll be kind of another phase for us to learn how we can partner and work together with those suppliers to help meet our overall greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So that's what I had today, Noah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul, for leading us through that. I am now going to invite Nadia to come off mute and take us through.
Thanks, Noah. Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia, and I work at Specialized as the product sustainability lead. So usually focused mostly on reducing the impact of our products, but today I have a more sort of owned operation opportunity to share with the rest of the group. So we've been working closely with a company called Common Energy. Basically, consider them a liaison for connecting both businesses and individuals with renewable energy opportunities. So they do that in a variety of different ways. They can, you can shoot for the moon, and they can help you set up like your own development by connecting you with like renewable energy developers. They can also connect you with community solar opportunities, and then they have like on-site options, RECs, et cetera. So just sort of talking through that, right? We all sort of know that renewable energy is something where it's often considered low-hanging fruit. And I think there's a reason why, because the way Common sort of creates some of these connections, you actually can save a little bit on your monthly energy bill, which is a really great way to, again, show your commitment to sustainability, but also reduce your bottom line expenses, which is sort of like the golden quintessential thing we're all going after in sustainability. So when we started working with them, they basically helped us go through our current impact. So shared with them a list of like where our sites are across the US. They analyzed those sites based on where they already know existing community solar projects exist. So in states like, I think it's like Oregon, Illinois, Minnesota, New York, Maine, there are some sites or there are some community solar projects that already exist where you can essentially just opt into them. And then you get credit for the renewable energy, you get a small deduction on your bill, and it's really, again, that like win-win scenario. For states where maybe they don't have those community solar opportunities, they can also connect you with people who can help you set up solar on site, set up RECs, or PPAs or VPPAs. So that's what we're sort of looking at with them, but they also offer something for employees as well. So really a cool opportunity to just engage your employees and let them know that like you're committed to transitioning to a more sustainable future. Do you want them to have the opportunity to help as well? So they can also help your teammates across any version of states, sort of just educate them on renewable energy opportunities, as well as help them transition, their home energy bills to renewable energy. So quick overview of what they do. And again, just like the closest thing I think that you can find to low-hanging fruit. And Common is just very open to helping, again, businesses and individuals transition to renewable energy. So I'll drop the name of a contact there in the chat. And yeah, Noah, that's what I had to share today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nadia. And just a big thank you to Greg, Brent, Paul, and Nadia. That was fantastic. I definitely learned a lot. We now have some time for questions. So I would encourage you to drop your questions into the Q&A chat bar on the lower toolbar. And I want to say that this webinar is recorded, and I will send a follow-up email to everybody who attended or who would like a copy of the recording for colleagues, and I will include the contact information of our panelists for the day, as well as the resources that they shared. So if anything comes up after this, we should be all good. We did have one question from Phil, a bike shop professional in Florida, and I will drop that in the chat so everyone can see. Phil says, I'm interested to learn how to channel my used tubes and tires to properly be recycled. So that's a great question. If anybody on the panel would like to answer that, we can answer that for Phil.
I can comment on it. We're currently collecting tires and tubes at our Minnesota facility. So if a retailer has a business within driving distance to QVP, we accept those at our will call desk. So a lot of times our local dealers will come in to pick up an order, and they'll drop off inner tubes and tires. And then for tires, we send them to Liberty Tire to get recycled. And we cover that cost. And then for inner tubes, we ship those to Schwalbe USA in Washington, and they actually recycle those into new tubes. So from a retail perspective, probably the best thing I would recommend is connecting with Schwalbe. They have a program where you can ship inner tubes directly to their facility. I think you need to be a Schwalbe dealer. And they will send you a shipping label and instructions on how to do that. But for tires are a little more challenging. I think that if there's a Liberty Tire recycler in the area, that would be a place to see if they can get tires recycled there. But there's not like a whole US tire recycling program. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Paul. And we have an attendee that has the same question for CO2 canisters.
I think that's one that's also regional. I know we can recycle metal in curbside in Minnesota, but I'm not sure if that's the case everywhere. I don't know of a national CO2 cartridge recycling program, but it's a good idea to look into because it's a lot of waste in that category.
Thanks, Paul. And we have a question from Greg. Greg says there's a lot going on in the world these days that can distract from sustainability and climate efforts. What are some ways you're finding you keep making progress on climate despite everything else that's going on? Such a good question, very topical, and it was alluded to by some of our panelists today that the overall environment out there right now doesn't feel all that friendly to sustainability. And I would open this up to any panelist who wants to contribute to this answer, because I think you'll probably have something really valuable to say. We'll say on the People for Bikes and sharing these conversations and sharing progress that our members are working on and the milestones that they're achieving has helped create some of its own momentum within these groups, being able to look at your peer companies and see the cool things they're doing, not only despite of and in the face of everything else that's happening in the political environment, but sort of as a response to it. And the second part of that, I think, is that we've seen how important sustainability is to consumers. I would say overall, people who buy bikes and bike products are pretty tuned in to what they like. There's a lot of gearheads out there, and the gearheads also pay attention to the companies and pay attention to what the companies are up to. So we've seen that that too can help drive some momentum. But I would encourage any of our excellent panelists to come off and see if they have any experience with that question.
I can add in a couple thoughts. Really like insightful question. I think ditto on engaging consumers right now, because I think there's a hunger for people to just see any type of leadership, no matter where that's coming from, on climate. And we're reminded every day that there's some new extreme weather event that's tied to climate change. And so people want to see that folks are stepping up and doing what they can to reduce their emissions. And it feels like the corporate sector is really well poised right now to do that. I also feel like right now everyone kind of finding their tribe on this issue, and like holding hands together is really important. And so People for Bikes feels like is a place where those kind of conversations and encouragement can happen, because yeah, it is very weighty on a daily basis to just like hear all the negative news and noise that's out there. And then the last thing I'd say is just like keep going. This is a journey, and it's one like project, one investment, $1 spent at a time. And every company has something they can do. So just get started and like keep going, would be my advice to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. And we have one more question. It's from Mark. Mark says, I am busy completing requests from customers about our ESG program. It's starting to feel like I'm answering the same questions over and over. It sure would be nice to have an industry clearinghouse site where I can log in, upload my data once, and refer all customers to that. It'd also be nice to have my suppliers upload their ESG data so anyone can see the progress they're making on ESG as well. Any chance PFB wants to host something like this? I think the industry is finally ready for it. That's an excellent point. And that's one of the things we love to do at People for Bikes is centralize work and make sure that our members aren't duplicating their efforts or spending time in ways that are redundant. Do any of our panelists have any insight or experience on this? And I would also love to connect with Mark offline about this to discuss it a little more in depth, because I'm really intrigued by the idea.
One thing that I've seen in the marketplace is there are some emerging new startups that are trying to solve this issue for companies. One that I'm familiar with is called Cold, COLD, and they are trying to be somewhat of that aggregator to reduce some of the paperwork burden of companies complying and reporting to all the different frameworks that are out there. There's also a startup called Novi, Novi, that is trying to play that role specifically for retailer related reporting. So there are a couple existing platforms that are out there, still fairly new, but potentially could help solve that type of problem in the long term.
Thanks, Greg. And you mentioned Cold Climate. We have a great contact over at Cold Climate and some resources that we can share. So Mark, I will follow up with you about this and we can continue the conversation. And it looks like those are our questions for now. So I want to say thank you again to all of our panelists. That was wonderful. I want to thank you all of our attendees. I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to learn more about the important sustainability work that we can all do together. We will have one more sustainability working group meeting, our quarterly, before the end of the year. So that will likely be in October. I will share this recorded presentation and contact information and resources from our presenters today. If you had any questions or want to follow up on anything in particular, you can email me at noah@peopleforbikes.org. We can also talk about getting more involved in the sustainability working group. So with that, I will ask that Toby stops the recording and everybody has a great afternoon.